Hello, welcome to the Plunge podcast with your host Sean Curzon and Chris Curzon.
Hell yeah.
So, Chris, we're going to talk about today is mass shootings because a couple weeks ago there was the Elliot Rodger shooting in Santa Barbara, California. What do you think about mass shootings in general?
Well, they're pretty fucking crazy, obviously. I mean, they seem to happen way too frequently. Um, God, there's been a lot over the last 4 years. It seems like I don't know.
Okay, well, I got some statistics here for you. According to
hear
the FBI, mass shooting is anytime there's a single incident of four or more killings, not including the perpetrator,
Go on.
and they happen about 20 times a year.
So four or more victims happens about 20 times a year.
Yes.
That actually seems pretty low.
Yeah. So this could just be someone who in the crime, like a crime of passion type thing.
Sure.
You get mad, you shoot someone, and then you shoot people in the room, or there's a drug deal gone wrong, and you shoot the people in the room.
Drug deal gone wrong. That could be another one. And that's considered a mass shooting. Like if it's a criminal, there's a criminal involvement there. Do they consider that a mass shooting?
I think so. I think it's just any time there's a quadruple homicide,
Oh, okay.
or you shoot someone and then you walk down the street and shoot someone else, as long as it's tied together in that same incident,
Gotcha.
four or more shootings or killings in that single incident.
Right.
The problem is that's not what I think the public talks about when they talk about mass shootings.
What do they talk about?
More than four, obviously.
Oh, so
'Cause you don't-
13 plus.
Because here's something I've noticed, and this is just speculation on my part, but I've noticed that after a mass shooting like Elliot Rodgers' Santa Barbara shooting, the Sikh temple shooting, what else? The Virginia Tech shooting, obviously Columbine's one we have to look at. After any one of these shootings, reportings on these shootings by the news and the other media sources tends to go up in the days that follow.
Sure.
So they're not just talking about shooting here, shooting there. They're talking about or mass shooting here or there. They're talking about just shootings in general.
Gotcha.
So you'll see one person shot dead by lone gunman or whatever. Incident. I remember hearing about one. It was two guys or two groups of kids arguing about who made the best Kool-Aid
Oh, wow.
on the block.
That led to a shooting?
Yeah,
That's pretty fucked up. Did anyone die?
I think so. But shootings happen for weird reasons. But when we're talking about these mass shootings, we're not just the four or more people. We're talking about 6, 7, 8, 12 people in a single incident.
Yeah.
I think that's what the population as a whole views as a mass shooting.
Sure.
Like the Rachel Maddow thing I talked about off camera, where she was talking about mass shootings have increased when they haven't. But if you limit it to 12 or more people, they have.
Right.
And that's what she's talking about. Never mind that Elliot Rodgers, I think she said this after the Elliot Rodgers thing, it was 6 people.
Right.
Not the 12 number. So she was just sort of inflating it, based on her own decision on what to define as a mass shooting. But the FBI decides it's 4 or more.
Well, thank you, FBI.
Yeah.
For
So when
defining that
we're
for us.
talking
I mean,
about,
it's sick either way.
in general, when we're talking about mass murders, there's a study done by James Allen Fox and Monica de la Torre of Northeastern University, which is in Boston. They did a little study, and they looked at the statistics, the incidents, and they found that mass murderers don't really snap and kill people. They typically plan their assaults days, weeks, or months in advance.
Sure.
Their motives are typically revenge, power, loyalty, terror, and profit. And so you see that with gang type things with they're doing with drugs.
Mm.
So it's obvious there's power and profit. And we're not just talking about gangs in urban areas. We're talking about going back hundreds of years to Al Capone and any sort of organized crime syndicate.
That's criminal intent. I guess
Yeah.
the mass shootings we're generally talking about are usually crazy people.
Yeah, the ones that the people always say, well, there must have been some sort of psychosis involved, whether or not there's psychosis involved at all.
It's also interesting that the majority of them, minus Fort Hood shooter didn't shoot themselves, and then James Holmes didn't shoot himself, but the majority of those people always turn the gun on themselves too. Which is kind of
Not
weird.
the majority, but a large number.
Well, with the higher numbers, the 25 deadliest or whatever.
Okay, well here's the exact statistics I found. This is off the active shooter statistics page on the FBI website. 49% of attackers committed suicide, so almost a majority. 34% were arrested, and 17% were killed by probably police or other people, usually by police.
How was Adam Lanza killed?
Adam Lanza, he was arrested. He was the one in Aurora, right?
No, Adam Lanza, that's James Holmes. Or John.
Oh.
Yeah, James Holmes. Adam Lanza was the Sandy Hook guy.
Oh, that's right. I don't know. Wasn't he killed, or did he shoot himself?
I don't know. He had 2 bullet holes in the back of his head. They ruled it a suicide.
That's weird.
That is weird.
Anyway, some other interesting facts about these mass murders, active shooters. Again, off the FBI website, 2% of the shooters bring improvised explosive devices as additional weapons.
Whoa.
In 10% of cases, the shooter stops and walks away. In 20% of the cases, the shooter goes mobile, moving to another location.
Oh, yeah. That's what Elliot Rodgers did for sure.
Right. 43% of the time, the crime is over before the police arrive. In 57% of the shootings, an officer arrived while shooting is still underway. And the attacks ended before the police arrived 49% of the time. And 50% of the time, the attacks ongoing when police arrived, officers had to use force to stop the killing.
That makes sense.
Which is funny because, like, I remember, because I think I was in 8th or 9th grade when Columbine happened. I remember it was announced on the intercom in school.
Oh, yeah.
I remember reading about it later. The cops showed up and they didn't go in.
Yeah, that was a confusing thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They didn't know how to react to that situation.
Yeah, because we hadn't had a school shooting like that in quite a while.
Right. Well, it's funny because they came up with new procedures or whatever to just protect something from that from happening again.
Yeah, they did.
But I mean, I think it's more to calm the nerves of the media or calm the nerves of the masses rather than actually. I mean, you're trying to do something. I think they one of the things is they want the victims maybe to get more active and make sure you're running, or if you have the ability to fight, then do it. Or a police officer should take a shot immediately. But I mean, I don't know where the statistics are since then. But
well, we both have jobs. I don't know about you, but my work has a class called active shooter that you're requested to attend, and they go over scenarios and how you can react.
Right.
So you hear the pops going off from the guns, pop, 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 and they tell you if you can leave the scene, just get out. Don't worry about anyone else. Tell people along the way though. I hear a shooter. There's a shooter. Let's leave, but don't go out of your way to help anyone. Your friends in the room next door, don't go help him. Run by if you can. Say, hey, get out. If you can't, lock yourself in a room and be quiet. Barricade the door if possible, and any windows to the hallway or whatever.
That's a good idea.
And if all else fails, they're coming in the door or the window. Be prepared to jump them, several of you.
Oh yeah. So
they come in the door. You're hiding around the corner. Attack them.
Yeah, you
with whatever you can. So I don't know if you've gone through any of those types of classes.
No, which is crazy because I'm a janitor at a school district, and we have never ever had anything like that. In fact, I remember being called into a meeting about security or whatever. I was talking to some people that were involved with security or whatever, and the things they were discussing weren't really relevant to actually protecting people. It was mostly about making sure that people couldn't get in after hours, which is crazy because the real issue should probably be the daytime safety. And one of the ways they are addressing that issue is they have make sure you check into the front office before you go through the rest of the building, which makes sense. But I mean, no offense, that front office receptionist is not going to be able to stop a guy with a gun.
Right.
And the doors are all unlocked anyway. They can just walk right in, So it doesn't make any sense to me.
I can't remember where I saw it. I don't think I put it on here, but I think 28% of schools have armed security guards, be it police, resource officers, or private company guards.
Yeah, totally. There should be one school resource officer on hand at all times, but I think they break it up to the different schools. So I mean, if somebody really wanted to attack somebody, they would just have to know the schedule of the police officer or look for a police car outside. Yeah.
The other thing though is that I do have it right here. 28% of schools.
28%.
Already employed security guards. But they say specifically, this is part of that study I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. There's no way for armed guards to sufficiently protect every single one of their students in an event of a mass shooting.
Exactly.
And actually, I think in the Columbine case, there was an armed guard there.
Was it really?
And they did get in a shootout with one of them.
Oh shit! I think you're right. Yeah.
Huh. The problem is you died. I mean, you have it's luck of the draw. In some cases.
Are you saying maybe the security guard wasn't properly trained though? I mean,
you're
fighting untrained people.
Yeah, I'm not saying they weren't trained. It's just no matter how good of a cop you are, you're not going to be able to best an opponent 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And actually, that ties into like gun control arguments that I was going to bring up a little bit later.
Yeah. Oh, here, dude. Here's another thing. It says right here that Adam Lanza was delayed from entering the school's main entrance and had to shoot his way through a security window. That didn't really stop him from murdering 20 little kids, though.
Right.
Unfortunately. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what other like alternative measures you could utilize to stop these kind of things from happening. I mean, but in a case like Adam Lanza, like how the fuck do you do that? You know, like maybe with the Columbine shooters, there was like you could like read into their psychology a little bit and say, man, these kids are a little fucked up in the head. But in the circumstance of like an Adam Lanza, like where was the point of that guy going in there and doing that in the first place? I don't think anyone saw that coming. I don't think a whole lot of people saw Elliot Rodgers, you know, doing what he did, but maybe the parents should have known. But
well, I think in the case of Elliot Rodgers, actually, the parents did suspect something, and they actually.
Oh sure, yeah.
Here's what happened with the Elliot Rodgers thing was they noticed something wrong with their child. They were trying to help. They had taken him to therapy. That was funny.
What happened? Did we lose a light?
Yeah, the light got blown over by the wind.
We can edit that out in editing.
No, we can't.
Shit. All right, ignore that.
Don't pull a Conan O'Brien. Anyway, so the parents actually did call the police, and the police went to check up on him, and they can only ask questions at that point. And that's just what they did. They asked him questions and how he's going to, and he just acted like a normal person. I think a lot of times these people they're in the state of mind where they are so good at hiding it what they're planning that the police couldn't get any lead on him to book him or hold him, detain him, or investigate further.
Sure, yeah.
So they couldn't go in and be like, okay, can we have a look at your home? No? Oh, okay. We'll just leave. And they can't get a warrant, so they can't come by and look, oh, you have a mass of weapons and ammo.
It was weird that they were unaware that this guy had legally purchased weapons. Why weren't if he had police contact 3 times, why wasn't there an ability for those cops to know that this guy had been purchasing weapons?
I don't know. Sometimes when you go to trade shows, it's not you're not registered.
Oh, there you go.
I don't know where he bought the guns exactly. But I mean, I don't think there's a unified database, and I think that's part of the thing the NRA is always fighting against is getting a registered database of all known gun handlers.
I don't understand their argument. You know, like I'm not necessarily like against guns or whatever, but like I don't understand the argument of like having a list of everyone that has weapons. Why is it such a violation of your freedoms that you're on a database saying that you have guns? I mean, you're on a national registry for like driver's license or whatever. You know,
right.
I could definitely access that.
Now, I don't want to say this is the argument, but this is an argument I have heard from that side. Mm-hmm. And it's too easy to discredit this kind of argument because usually the fringe groups, they say they don't want a registered database because that's the first people the government will target.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
But it's a massive list. Like
it is a massive list.
It would be so big. Okay, so they're going to target half the population of America? You know, I don't...
Yeah,
I don't see that. I don't see that as a valid argument.
Well, so I think the other thing is like, so you have a registered database. So they're not going to go after the people with the handguns. They're going to go after the people with lots of weapons
and shit. Yeah, or like mass
stockpiles. Like you're registered for a handgun. Like who cares? You're a hill of beans. But the person with a registered AR, a registered 45, a registered 9mm, a registered let's just say Tommy gun. You have a lot of weapons. You're buying a lot of ammo. There you might be the one they go and detain at your compound in Wyoming.
Okay,
Sorry,
maybe it could happen. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's not my issue.
Right. The study that I was talking about, other little things they talk about. What they're doing was try to debunk myths surrounding mass shooters. Mm-hmm. Violent entertainment, especially video games, are causally linked to mass murders. Scientists have found no causal link between video games and mass murder. Violent video games may be a symptom and not a cause for the incidents. So
how do you mean like a symptom?
So you're planning this kind of spree. You might play more violent video games than most people.
Just because you have that tendency?
Yeah. But then again, I play a lot of violent video games.
Well, yeah. A lot of people play violent video games and they're not out. I mean, that's just kind of slippery slope.
And I feel like I'm actually less violent than most people I know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think that has to do with a little bit more of a social thing, though. It's like I'm relatively antisocial. I'm not going out and getting involved with certain things that might cause me trouble, like drinking at the bar and then getting in a fist fight with someone who has a disagreement with me.
Right.
Widening the availability of mental health services will allow unstable individuals to get treatment. They need to decrease mass murders. Increasing mental health facilities may not reach those on the fringe who would turn to murder, as many see the blame residing in others, not themselves. I think that's a little poorly worded. I copied this verbatim from the study. But anyway, what they're talking about is that they say, because one of the arguments is like all these people are just they're not criminals, but they're mentally ill people, right?
Sure, yeah.
And so they're like, oh well, and there's a problem with mental health treatment in this country, but widening those services doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go seek out help. And even then, like, people are afraid that if you get reported by like a relative or what committed, you're not going to be able to get out. So there's that fear that you go in, you might not come out because they'll detain you.
Right, which was, I mean, that was probably true, like, I don't know, 50 years ago. Wasn't there, like, didn't we have all kinds of people locked up in mental health institutions for a really long time?
Yeah.
I wish I could find some information on that. I'm just terrible at Googling stuff.
I think just people are afraid of that idea, so they don't want to go get treatment.
Yeah, but I mean, it seems like that probably doesn't happen nearly as much, or you, like, have ways out, or...
Yeah.
I mean, back in the day, I could totally see it. There was some pretty fucked up things we used to do with mental health, and I think we may have gone polar opposite of that, and maybe we do need a little bit more mental health care and more mental health facilities. But who wants to fund that shit, man? We don't even want to fund Medicaid at 1 in 5 people having that. I mean, that pisses a lot of people off. And when you're looking at the numbers, I mean, it probably makes, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense. 80 people died. If we had 20 mass shootings or whatever at 4 people apiece, 80 people died, versus spending, another $30 billion on fucking mental health care. I think people are really short-sighted when it comes to that kind of money spending.
Yeah. And one of the things I want to emphasize about these mass shootings, and I'm absolutely pro gun control, but this goes against my points. Mass shootings are relatively rare.
Right.
Like the chance of you dying in a mass shooting. You take all the homicides in this country. Mass shootings only account for something like less than 1% of all homicides in this country.
That makes sense.
So my problem then is there's so many freaking gun homicides already. It's just usually they're 1, 2, or 3 people. Mm-hmm. It's almost discounting mass shootings in general.
Yeah.
We have some like over 10,000 over 10,000 homicides in this country.
Yep.
A year. Most of them gun related.
Yeah, we have a shit ton of gun deaths.
And gun violence is relatively unheard of in the United Kingdom and other Western European nations who have banned firearms. Mm-hmm. Well, they're not banned, but they put strict regulations on them. Like you have to have, like handguns are banned in the UK, I think.
I believe you're right.
You can have shotguns and rifles, but they have to be in a locked safe.
That makes sense.
And those are generally
there's not a lot of gun violence in the UK, is there?
There's like very little gun violence, and that's the reason is no one has guns.
And it's specifically handguns. You can have shotguns and rifles. I had no idea. I thought like all guns were banned.
They're for sport purposes, and they have to be locked in a safe.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, because I know.
And then I think here's the other thing. This goes against what our Fourth Amendment would be, which is illegal search and seizure. Mm-hmm. The police have the right to come in at any time and look in your house to make sure
that shit locked up.
Yeah, the shit are locked up.
That seems a little ridiculous.
And I say that because it seems a little ridiculous, right? But I don't think it happens that often. But there's the possibility. Sure. Like just imagine a cop coming by and like, oh, so we know you've purchased guns recently. Yeah. Well, can we come in and look to make sure they're locked up properly? Right. Now that's to stop anyone else from getting access, like an Adam Lanza taking his mom's firearms. It's not going to stop the person who bought the guns, like Elliot Rogers, and then using them.
Yeah, they wouldn't do that.
But I bring this up because as I was looking for research on this article, one of the things the pro-gun rights argument was gun control doesn't work. And they cite the one example, right, to disprove it.
Yep.
And it was a case of a 17-year-old in Germany who they already have strict gun laws. So again, the guns have to be locked up. He was able to get access to his dad's 9mm Glock, which he used to shoot at people, killing like something like 12 people.
Fuck.
Now, how did he get access to that Glock? They even mentioned in the article that his dad left it out on the table outside the safe.
Oh. See, that's just stupid.
So it's like saying, oh, gun control doesn't work because people won't follow it.
Because people are irresponsible anyway.
Yeah. Now, doesn't mean that's ridiculous because then we can have, a talk about, well, or make it crime, like, oh, if you're not locking up your guns. I mean, it was a clear violation of the rules.
Oh yeah,
It's hard to enforce things that are in people's homes.
that's true. And I don't really want them doing that anyway. But shit, man, it's a fine line we walk.
So I like to go over the arguments for and against gun control.
What were we talking about?
I think I want to talk about gun control.
Oh,
So the arguments for and against gun control. What do you think?
the arguments for and against gun control.
Yeah. Where do you stand on gun control?
I don't really have a stance.
Gun control. You don't really have a stance?
No, I don't think there's a reason to have a stance on that.
That's an interesting take. Anyway, my stance is that this could either be very short or very long. I believe we have the right to own guns. The Second Amendment says in order to form a militia, the citizens have the right to bear arms, something along those lines. And people like to focus on the militia part, at least those in favor of gun control. They say that's an old, outdated part of it, and we don't need it. And the only way to justify owning guns is to ignore that part. But I say, because the reason why they say that...
Alex Jones says, more guns, less violence. And he's got a point, statistically speaking. More guns, less crime statistics. Here's a nice little graph on Infowars.com. Let me just pull this up.
First off, fuck Infowars.
Okay, here's a 5-year trend from 2007 to 2011 in estimated number of gun offenses. This is a FBI Uniform Crime Report. And it looks like the data would suggest that the more guns there are in terms of gun ownership, the less gun violence there actually is.
Explain the UK gun rates then.
Well, it's interesting because the United Kingdom has a lot of gun violence.
Very little, actually.
Oh, didn't know that. According to Wikipedia, that's incorrect. It looks like gun violence actually increased, or criminal activity increased over 80% since they passed the 1997 Firearms Act. And the Violent Crime Reduction of 2006, there was a similar ratio there. I'm just making this up at this point. I can't follow Wikipedia.
Okay, so what the arguments I've found on both sides that are like, I don't know, that I find appealing are for gun rights. The arguments generally that I find appealing are for defense, and to protect oneself from the government. And people always say, well, protect yourself from the government. What are you going to do? Start a revolution, blah, blah, blah. How are you going to fight jets and cruise missiles and nuclear weapons? And the only reason why I find this appealing is because I guess it's sort of, that sort of American spirit, how we started this country through revolution. We fought a larger, more powerful country to gain our freedom. Mm-hmm. So it might be logical, but it bothers me when people say, oh, well, how are you going to fight the government with just small arms? Anyone who says that has no idea what went on in Fallujah in Iraq with the insurrections and how we were fighting. They don't know how civil wars are generally fought. Like even in Syria, you don't just wipe out, you don't practice total warfare, right?
Yeah, you use guerrilla tactics.
Yeah. So when they say, well, the government will just nuke you, well, yeah, they're going to blow up a whole city. Why would they do that? You're killing a lot of innocent people doing that. Like even in Syria, they usually try to target. Although there have been chemical weapon usage, but at least with chemical weapons, for the most part, you're preserving any sort of infrastructure when you're doing the killing. So you're leaving buildings intact, infrastructure intact. You're not, indiscriminately bombing.
Right.
And not only that, but such actions will often turn like other nations against you. So it would be possible, very difficult, but possible to fight a government with a large enough insurrection here in the United States. Hence the gun argument. Now, what I find appealing about the gun control arguments, and I think there's more of them than, the ones I find appealing on the gun rights arguments. When they talk about the defense, like particularly in public, like if there's a mass shooter, people pulling guns out, people aren't trained to use guns. Most people. You might be trained like physically to use a gun, like at a firing range, like you can aim and shoot and pull the trigger, but you don't have the training for this to overcome the psychological like level to pull the trigger and to shoot someone. You're not going to be trained to deal with the stress of that situation where you're in danger and everyone else is in danger, but particularly yourself. You might not be trained to handle the stress like say a police officer would, or even better, a military, soldier would have gone through these kind of training. The other things I find that nations with strict gun control generally have less gun deaths,
right,
without a typical rise in violent crime. And they talk about the amendments, the Second Amendment. It can be overturned. We can overturn amendments. It's in the Constitution. It would just take a massive shift in culture for us to do so. And even then, you don't even have to overturn the amendment, but to reinterpret the amendment. Like if we had a succession of court cases that thought that the Second Amendment meant something different than it does now. We've done that before in the past. So, and ultimately for me, it comes down to is that I like the idea that everyone could own a firearm and be safe with it and not, kill people with it. But people are stupid. I mean, even the best trained people sometimes have accidents. Too many people don't necessarily have the training, and they don't go out to get the training. Like one story I read was after one of the it was again the only reason why I saw it is because it happened after one of the mass shooting incidents that got reported. A man, I don't even want to call him a man. He's like basically barely a man, 19 years old, almost like a boy, taking care of his girlfriend's child. Playing little kid like made a pistol out of his hand or whatever. And it was like pow pow. The guy pulls out his gun, 9mm, does the same thing, boom boom, but it was loaded and it discharged and hit the kid in the head.
Oh, that's too bad.
Like that's the kind of stuff that I think that's what really bothers me is the people who are just too stupid to like, wait a minute, you never point a gun at someone. I mean, this happens to smart people too. I mean, if you're just not familiar with firearms. But it just hurts, that if that guy didn't have a gun, that kid would be fine.
Yeah. But how do you screen somebody like that?
Well, that's hard. How do you? Because you could do a background check. He probably had no criminal history. Probably no psychological issues. He's just an idiot.
Yeah. Maybe they should make people take IQ tests. And if you have an IQ lower of 108, no guns.
See, I don't know. I don't know how that would work.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. We're out of here.